my last video, I introduced a theory I made with T-Dreads that had pretty big implications on the FNAF timeline. LeftyDCI. In short, it's saying that Lefty is possessed by the 5 children who were killed in the DCI. The responses to that were somewhat mixed. Some people really liked it, while others absolutely hated it. As for the people that were stuck in the middle, they weren't convinced of the evidence I provided, and to be honest, that's kinda my fault. In my rush to get this theory out there, I didn't fully consider all of the implications of what I was saying, nor did I take a step back and view the entire scope of it. But now that some time has passed, me and TD have both gone over the evidence again, reviewing our own theories on the matter and uncovering new things to talk about. And now, I am 100% convinced that LeftyDCI is real. So today, I'm gonna double down on it. I will give you my full interpretation and timeline of events. I think I'll be able to convince some of you, but for the people that I can't convince, I ask you not to turn your head and walk away from what I'm presenting. Because there's one thing that I can tell you for a fact. The community at large has overlooked something about FNAF 6 for a long time. And if the evidence that I have doesn't suggest LeftyDCI, then it suggests something else entirely. And I want to figure out what that something is. So, without further ado, let's double down on my craziest theory yet. We're going to start this off a bit differently than usual. Rather than me just diving right into what I think, I'd like to propose a question to you all first. Much like any other question originating from this series, it's pretty open-ended and technically doesn't have a correct answer, but I certainly have an answer of my own for it, and I'd like to see what everyone else thinks as well. I'll go into my answer later in the video, so for now, I want you to just think about this as we progress through the theory. The question is, why does Henry have access to the blueprints for the Afton Robotics scooper in FNAF 6? Pause if you'd like while thinking about it, or just keep it in the back of your mind as I start with our first main topic for today, Lefty's appearance in Ultimate Custom Night. Last time, I concluded that Lefty was possessed by a dead child, much like a good chunk of the other animatronics in the game. Since then, this was brought to my attention by T-Dreads, confirming that Lefty is possessed by Scott's own words. However, when it comes to who possesses this animatronic, that's where I lost some people. There are a good chunk of people that are under the impression that Lefty is possessed by Charlie, due to the puppet inhabiting Lefty as of Ultimate Custom Night. While I understand where they're coming from, I actually disagree for a lot of reasons. Firstly, as I said in my last video, Lefty and the puppet have 2 different voice actresses. I kinda think that this is pretty damning in and of itself. If they're the same person, then why are they voiced by different people? But not everyone is satisfied with only that, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of things. Lefty's name is made up of 5 acronyms: Lure, Encapsulate, Fuse, Transport, and Extract. Last time, I made a point of Fuse potentially meaning something bigger, but I'm willing to give this point up and admit that I was jumping the gun a bit. Despite the fact that it's the thing that kinda jump-started this whole theory, I don't think it's actually necessary for everything else to work. That said, there's a good chance that Fuse just means that Lefty fused with the puppet, which could be interpreted as Charlie now possessing Lefty. So then, why am I so against the idea that Charlie is the sole possessing Lefty in this game? Well, let's talk about the final acronym in Lefty's name, Extract. We never really get a hint for what this means. We can gather what everything else is pretty easily. Lefty lured the puppet, then encapsulated it and fused with it before transporting it to the FNAF 6 location. But Extract? We never see anything like that. We know that the puppet's in there still, so it's not like the animatronic got extracted. I was stumped on this for a little bit, but then I got to thinking. And that's when it hit me.
And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still, and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, friend. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent.
During the FNAF 6 fire, all of the salvage animatronics pop up on screen, all except for Lefty. This is already pretty weird. Why would Lefty not show up here? Even if the animatronic himself isn't all that important, certainly Charlie is. And keep in mind, Henry directly speaks to Charlie during this scene, immediately after he directly speaks to Afton. When he speaks to Afton, we can see Scraptrap pop up on screen, and that's right after we see the other 2 salvage animatronics. So, for all intents and purposes, there's no good reason for Lefty to be left out of this, but for some reason, he was. Why? Well, there's one answer I could come up with. What if putting Lefty on screen there would have been misleading? What if showing off Lefty while Henry was directly speaking to Charlie was misleading, because Charlie wasn't actually inside of Lefty? But how is that even possible? How can Charlie's soul not be inside of Lefty when she's inside of the puppet that Lefty fused with as of this point in the timeline? Well, that brings me to the answer I have for the question I asked all of you at the start of this video. The reason why Henry has the blueprints to the scooper. There are 2 other blueprints found in the game. One for Lefty and one for Rask, the audio alert used throughout FNAF 6. Now, why would the scooper also be here unless Henry intended to build one? Well, as it turns out, he did build one. We just don't see it in FNAF 6. We never see it at all. Until we get to Ruin. The fact that there's a fully operational scooper in Ruin has always bothered me, because it literally comes out of nowhere and has zero explanation as to why it's there and why it looks so different. I mean, look at this next to the blueprints. These are entirely different creations, and I think that's intentional, because I think that they serve different purposes. Follow me on this for a moment. Why would Henry be building something that's meant to inject remnant? He's not the one who's been experimenting with it and trying to bridge the gap between life and death. That's William's thing. Even if LeftyDCI is real, I don't think that it means that Henry has remnant on hand. To my understanding, that's not how remnant even works. So, by all means, this is a pretty useless thing for Henry to build. So, what if this isn't a remnant injector? What if it's the exact opposite? A remnant extractor? Take a closer look at the scooper. Obviously, it looks a lot different from the scooper that we've known since Sister Location, but there's one detail about it that's never been brought up before. In the very center of it, it has a small needle. Unlike the After Robotics scooper that would mangle whatever it touched, this scooper was made with precision in mind, able to target an exact point without causing too much damage to the animatronic. And what do we see in FNAF 6? An animatronic in almost perfect condition, with the exception of one piece of damage. His eye. This is why Henry built the scooper. Not to inject remnant into things, but to extract remnant out of it. And by the time of FNAF 6, he had used it on Lefty's broken eye, and extracted Charlie's soul from within. And that's why every time we see the puppet's mask after FNAF 6, whether it be in a book or in a game, there's a key difference. The tears are now gone. The tears that formed as soon as Charlie possessed the puppet have now been taken away, extracted along with Charlie's soul by the scooper, so Henry could spend his final moments with the only person that mattered to him. Okay, that was a lot, and all of that was entirely just to prove that Lefty isn't possessed by Charlie in Ultimate Custom Night, which means Lefty's possessed by someone else, someone that's still unaccounted for, which brings us back to where this theory began in the first place, Candy Cadet's story about the kind man and the 5 orphans. Now, there were a good chunk of people last time telling me that I was taking this story a bit too literally, which is something I both agree and disagree with. On one hand, this obviously shouldn't be taken one for one. There wasn't actually someone adopting 5 orphans, and there wasn't a real burglar that snuck into someone's house and killed them all. However, that doesn't mean that we should just ignore every detail that this story gives us. If the point of this story was just 5 things becoming one, then we wouldn't have 3 different stories with that resolution. That would just be redundant. So let's outline the core elements of this story and go from there. We have a kind man, 5 children, a burglar, and a coffin. The kind man takes in the 5 children, the burglar kills the 5 children, the kind man stitches the 5 dead children together, and something comes to life from them. That's what the story is dumbed down to its very core, and as such, it's what we're going to try and solve. Let's start with a bit of a roll call, namely for the kind man. In my previous video, I concluded that the kind man has to be Henry Emily, as no one else particularly fit the description that well. However, this didn't sit well with a lot of people, namely because it would mean that Henry Emily was responsible for stitching 5 bodies together and putting them in the same coffin. So, for the sake of argument, let's say that I'm wrong. So if the kind man isn't Henry, then who else could it be? Well, there really aren't that many options. In my comments section of the last video, I heard 2 come up, so let's go over them real quick. First off, the puppet. There are a lot of reasons why I disagree with this one. The puppet is hardly a kind man. It's a non-sentient animatronic made to protect children that eventually becomes a sentient animatronic possessed by a little girl, trying to shepherd lost souls into a peaceful afterlife. Also, whenever we see the puppet interact with dead children, they usually all get their own unique masks, a far cry from the single coffin that the kind man shoves all the dead children into. So if you ask me, no, Candy Cadet isn't talking about the puppet here. However, I do think that Candy Cadet references Charlie and the puppet in a different story. And if you want to hear more about that, go check this video out from T-Dreads where we go over it. So, the puppet's a no-go. So instead, let's talk about our other candidate, William. This one's kind of weird, and it wasn't my idea to begin with, but let's go over it. It's something like this. The kind man and the burglar are both William Afton, with the kind man being a facade that William uses to lure the children in. I kinda get where this is coming from, but I really don't see how you can make it work. This story relies pretty heavily on the kind man and the burglar being two different people, not only from the perspective of the kids, but from the perspective of the kind man himself. The reason that the kind man wanted to adopt the children was because he thought they'd be at greater risk of the burglar killing them otherwise. On that note, this implies that the kind man knew of someone going around killing children, and was actively trying to stop them, which doesn't line up with what William is doing in these games at all. However, it lines up extremely well with everything that we think we know about Henry, the person that I concluded was being represented by the kind man in the first place. There's also this line here that says that the kind man was giving the kids toys, which is synonymous with FNAF 2. And what happens in FNAF 2? The DCI, where William Afton sneaks in undercover and kills 5 children, like a burglar in the night, breaking in when no one is there to spot him. William has to be the burglar. We don't have anyone else who goes around killing children like that. And since it seems impossible for the burglar and the kind man to be the same person, that means that the only candidate we have left for the role is Henry. This, however, leads us to a weird conclusion. This would now mean that Henry Emily is the one who stitched 5 bodies together and stuffed them into one coffin, giving it new life. This is where it gets hard for me to figure out exactly what's going on. On one hand, the evidence I have suggests exactly what I said in my last video. Lefty's possessed by someone that's unaccounted for. A kind man is responsible for stitching together 5 bodies and giving them new life. The same kind man that's synonymous with giving these kids toys. To me, that all screams LeftyDCI. But if that's the case, then I also have to accept the difficult part of that solution. This would make Henry a total hypocrite, playing with innocent children's souls while simultaneously condemning William for doing the exact same thing. I'm gonna level with you guys for a moment. This is where I started to doubt this theory a little bit. I can say with confidence that Lefty is possessed in Ultimate Custom Night. I can say with confidence that Charlie's soul was extracted from Lefty sometime before FNAF 6, and isn't the voice that comes from Lefty. I can say with confidence that the DCI is being referenced by this Candy Cadet story, and I can say with confidence that the kind man in this story is Henry Emily. But when it comes to this, I can't say that I have an answer that I'm super confident in. However, I am confident that I've eliminated the other possibilities. That means that no matter how improbable the remaining answer is, it has to be true. Either that, or there's a stone left unturned. But I can't account for things that I don't know yet, so I have to do the next best thing. Commit as hard as I can to what I have on hand, and go as far with it as possible. Let's start off with the obvious. Why? Why did Henry feel the need to do any of what he did here? Well, there's only one answer that makes any amount of sense to me. He didn't want this to happen. He was trying to hide the bodies, perhaps because of what would have happened if someone, say the police for instance, saw those bodies. If that happened, who would have gotten blamed? If Henry thought he would have gotten caught in the crossfire for that, then maybe he decided to do the one thing that would save his skin. Hide the bodies where the police have historically never looked, the animatronics. Well, specifically, one animatronic. He's not crazy enough to put them in the animatronics that go on stage. Only William is insane enough to pull that off. So instead, he put them in the only animatronic that he could afford to put them in, Lefty. Or, well, not exactly Lefty. Considering the fact that Lefty's name is made up of 5 acronyms all relating to Henry's plans for the puppet, it feels strange to say that Lefty was around at the time of FNAF 2, at least in his current form. However, there's a very easy alternative, Carney. Carney looks almost identical to Lefty as is, and seems to have been around for Fall Fest, which happens years before FNAF 2 does. I can very easily believe that Lefty is a rebuilt version of Carney. And since Carney's around by the time of the DCI, I can believe that this is the coffin that Henry buried all of those bodies in. And then, to Henry's shock, Carney comes to life, an amalgamation of the 5 children's souls. After seeing this possession firsthand, this is what would lead to Henry realizing just how depraved William truly is, and to serve as his motivation for what he does in FNAF 6. So, during the years that Henry is completely missing from the story, he spends his time reverse engineering the Scooper to now serve as a remnant extractor, and refurbishing Carney into Lefty. I think that he continued to use this animatronic because, just like the kind man in the Candy Cadet story, he can't afford to make an entirely new one after spending so much to build a new Scooper and an entire audio lore system. This is reinforced further by the fact that in FNAF 6, you literally have to earn all of the funds that you use to buy other animatronics in the game. Then, he sends Lefty out to capture the puppet and bring it back to him, where he extracts his daughter's soul and then waits for someone to take the FNAF 6 job offer. And, well, we know how things go from there. Honestly, I think it all works out really well. It fits together while simultaneously explaining things that we never had a proper answer for. And it doesn't change anything about how climactic FNAF 6's ending was for the story. Honestly, I think it just enhances it even further. Some of you probably have a problem with me trying to retroactively fit Carney into events that transpire primarily around FNAF 2 and FNAF 6, when this animatronic wasn't even revealed until Help Wanted 2. And on one hand, I get it, and I don't really like doing it either. However, I think it's pretty important to understand that Scott does retroactive storytelling in his games a lot. Hell, everything we see in FNAF 1 is a story that he retroactively made after the game's success. So, while Carney might not have always been the answer, I certainly think he fits in now, and I think everything else fits in just as well. And, for the record, if you think retroactively fitting Carney in is problematic, just wait a few months until we get Secret of the Mimic, and people start retroactively changing everything about the timeline. But that's a headache for another day. For now, I'm gonna head out. Thanks for watching. This is my first time doing a proper part 2 to a video. Honestly, I didn't plan for it at first, but I thought it was really important for me to make this because, honestly, I really think I have something here. I think there's something more to LeftyDCI than I showed in the last video, and I wanted to push this as far as I could. So if you have any thoughts about what I might be missing, feel free to leave it in the comments. Or, call me a f***ing idiot down there for thinking any of this could be real or something. That works too. And be sure to like and subscribe. Anyway, I'm out of here. You'll see me again on someone else's channel pretty soon. Keep your eyes peeled, and consider it a precursor for the inevitable FNAF 2 video. Take it easy.